Some films didn't just push boundaries, they smashed through them so forcefully that censors had no choice but to lock them away for decades. In Hollywood's pre-code era, a handful of movies were so unsettling, so far ahead of their time, that they vanished from theaters almost as soon as they appeared. What made these films too disturbing for the public eye? And why did it take years, sometimes generations, for them to finally see the light of day? Let's dig into 13 pre-code films that were so shocking they spent years on the shelf. Freaks, 1932. There is simply no way to discuss disturbing pre-code films without starting with Freaks, the very definition of a movie ahead of its time, and for many, a film that was just too much. Directed by Todd Browning, Freaks assembled an unforgettable cast of real-life circus performers, people whose unique bodies and lives had long been hidden from polite society. Browning invited viewers directly into their world, asking audiences to confront their prejudices in the most unflinching way imaginable. From the moment it premiered, Freaks sent shockwaves through the industry. Audiences fainted, critics recoiled, and even seasoned MGM executives were left speechless by the film's raw emotional power. Stories circulated about test screenings where viewers ran screaming from the theater. Some cities banned the film outright. Others demanded heavy edits before allowing it on local screens. But the real panic came from the film's refusal to offer easy comfort. Freaks does not position its sideshow performers as objects of pity or fear, but as real people, capable of loyalty, friendship, and, in the film's infamous climax, a terrifying kind of justice. It was a vision of humanity that made many in 1932 deeply uncomfortable. As a result, MGM shelved Freaks just weeks after its release. The film disappeared for decades, surviving only in battered prints traded between collectors and cinephiles. Only years later did critics rediscover its power, recognizing Freaks not as an exploitation picture, but as a milestone in film history. Today, its legacy is that of a masterpiece too real and too honest for its own era. The Story of Temple Drake, 1933. Few films ignited such a whirlwind of outrage and censorship as The Story of Temple Drake. Based on William Faulkner's controversial novel Sanctuary, the movie starred Miriam Hopkins as Temple, a Southern debutante caught up in a web of violence, corruption, and fear. The film didn't just hint at its dark subject matter. It plunged headlong into a narrative that most filmmakers wouldn't dare touch for decades. The response was immediate and vicious. Church groups and women's organizations rallied to have the movie banned. Southern newspapers accused the filmmakers of defaming the region's honor, and screenings in several states were called off amid public protests. Even with significant edits demanded by censors, The Story of Temple Drake remained so controversial that many theaters refused to show it at all. What made the movie especially disturbing wasn't just the content. It was the film's unflinching gaze at power, complicity, and the failures of the justice system. Hopkins' performance captured the fear and confusion of a woman trapped in a society that refused to protect her, and that honesty proved too raw for 1933 audiences. With box office prospects crippled by the bans, the studio quietly shelved the film in many territories. For decades, The Story of Temple Drake was little more than a whispered rumor, an underground classic known to only the most dedicated film historians. Only in recent years has it been re-evaluated as a trailblazer, a film that dared to confront darkness even when the world wasn't ready. Island of Lost Souls, 1932. A fog-drenched nightmare of science gone wrong, Island of Lost Souls terrified and disturbed audiences in ways few movies ever had. Based on H.G. Wells's The Island of Dr. Moreau, the film starred Charles Laughton as the diabolical Dr. Moreau, a scientist who transforms animals into human-like creatures on his remote island. The makeup effects and atmosphere alone would have been enough to unsettle viewers, but it was the movie's philosophical questions that truly shook people. What does it mean to play God? How far can scientific ambition go before it destroys humanity itself? These were questions few films dared to ask, and Island of Lost Souls delivered them with haunting power. Censors in the United States and abroad recoiled from the movie's mixture of body horror, existential dread, and the sight of creatures neither fully animal nor fully human. The reaction was swift. In the UK, the film was banned for decades, not officially released until the 1950s. In America, many prints vanished, and the movie was shelved by nervous distributors who feared public backlash. Critics warned that Island of Lost Souls might warp the minds of viewers, while religious organizations demanded it be suppressed. For years, Island of Lost Souls existed in the shadows, its reputation growing among horror aficionados who whispered about its forbidden power. Only decades later did the film return to screens, and its legacy today is that of a work too chilling, too philosophical, and too unforgettable for its own time. The Sin of Norah Moran, 1933. The Sin of Norah Moran is a film as haunting as its legend. The story follows Norah, a young woman facing execution, and the secrets that brought her to the brink. Told through dreamlike flashbacks and non-linear storytelling, the film was so emotionally raw and innovative that it left 1933 audiences deeply unsettled. What made the film so disturbing wasn't just the plot, it was the way it delved into guilt, sacrifice, and injustice. Zita Johann delivers a performance of staggering vulnerability, and the film's refusal to offer easy answers left audiences with a sense of despair. Critics complained that The Sin of Norah Moran preyed on the anxieties of the innocent, and its avant-garde style only made things more confusing and unnerving. Censorship boards quickly moved to suppress the movie. In several states, prints were pulled from theaters after just a handful of screenings. With box office returns plummeting, the studio buried the film, and for years it was known only for its infamous poster, a surreal haunted image of a woman in torment. It took decades for The Sin of Norah Moran to resurface. When it finally did, critics praised its daring structure and emotional honesty. What had once been too disturbing for public consumption is now hailed as a lost masterpiece, a reminder of the risks pre-code Hollywood was willing to take and the price it paid. Safe in Hell, 1931. Safe in Hell dared to go where few films had ventured before. The story follows Gilda, a woman forced to flee New Orleans after a violent encounter, only to find herself trapped on a remote Caribbean island filled with exiled criminals and outcasts. Directed by William Wellman, the movie is a fever dream of paranoia, desperation, and the search for redemption in a world with no rules. Audiences were stunned by the film's willingness to show the bleak side of human nature. Critics labeled it unfit for respectable audiences, and church groups demanded it be pulled from theaters. The film's frank depiction of desperation, its scenes of betrayal, fear, and survival hit too close to home in Depression-era America. Censors quickly stepped in, banning Safe in Hell in multiple states and pressuring the studio to withdraw the film from circulation. The movie all but vanished, surviving only in private collections and whispered discussions among film buffs. For decades, Safe in Hell was a lost legend, a movie that seemed too real, too relentless, and too haunting for the audiences of its day. It wasn't until years later, with changing attitudes toward film and storytelling, that Safe in Hell found a new audience. Today, it stands as a powerful reminder of the limits of censorship and the enduring impact of a story too honest to be forgotten. Madame Satan, 1930. Madame Satan is unlike any other pre-code film. Directed by Cecil B. DeMille, it blends comedy, romance, and jaw-dropping spectacle, culminating in a masquerade aboard a Zeppelin that ends in disaster. What disturbed audiences, however, was not just the surreal visuals, but the underlying themes of marital betrayal, transformation, and the masks people wear. The film's wild party sequence, where society's most respectable citizens throw caution to the wind, was seen as an affront to American values. Critics and moral guardians decried the film for promoting chaos, and the Zeppelin crash, rendered with spectacular special effects, left viewers shaken. There was a sense that Madame Satan was not just entertaining, it was undermining the very fabric of society. Censors struggled to categorize the film, and after disappointing box office returns, the studio quietly pulled it from circulation. For years, Madame Satan was rarely screened, surviving only in studio vaults and among collectors who treasured its audacity. Its reputation as a lost classic only grew with time. Today, Madame Satan is celebrated for its visual bravado and thematic daring. But in its day, it was simply too strange and too disturbing to find a place in the mainstream. It serves as a testament to pre-code Hollywood's willingness to dream big, even when those dreams turned into nightmares. Murder at the Vanities, 1934. Murder at the Vanities blended crime, comedy, and showbiz excess into a single, dizzying package. Set backstage at a Broadway musical revue, the film is a whirlwind of elaborate performances, backstabbing, and a string of mysterious deaths that unravel in real time as the show goes on. Its daring visual style and relentless pace set it apart from other films of the era. What truly disturbed audiences was the film's refusal to draw lines between glamour and danger. The backstage world was shown as a place where ambition led to dark consequences, and the film's parade of elaborate musical numbers was intercut with moments of genuine suspense and dread. Critics worried that Murder at the Vanities blurred the boundaries between entertainment and corruption. After a brief and controversial run, censors intervened. The movie was shelved in many states, and prints circulated only among industry insiders. For decades, Murder at the Vanities was rarely seen outside film archives, its reputation as a boundary pusher solidified by its absence from mainstream screens. Only in recent years has the film been restored and appreciated for its daring blend of genres and its willingness to expose the dark side of show business. It's a reminder that sometimes the most entertaining films are also the ones that disturb us most deeply. Congo, 1932. Few films from the pre-code era match the sheer intensity and bleakness of Congo. Set in the heart of Africa, the film follows a tyrannical plantation owner who rules through fear and cruelty, manipulating everyone around him in a desperate quest for control. The film's relentless atmosphere of menace, violence, and moral decay made it one of the most unsettling experiences of its time. Audiences recoiled from Congo's raw portrayal of brutality and exploitation. The story offered no easy heroes, no comforting resolution, only the slow, inescapable unraveling of its characters' souls. Critics condemned the film for its unrelenting darkness, and censors quickly banned it in multiple cities, fearing it would poison the public mind. After a brief and disastrous run, the studio withdrew Congo from circulation, and it all but disappeared from theaters. For years, only collectors and scholars had access to surviving prints, and its reputation grew as one of the most disturbing lost films of the early 1930s. In later years, Congo has been reassessed as a brutally honest examination of power and obsession, but in its own time, it was simply too much for audiences, and too disturbing for Hollywood to let it remain in the spotlight. Yurt, Men in White, 1934. Men in White was marketed as a medical drama starring Clark Gable, but what audiences found was something far more complex and disturbing. The film follows a group of young doctors as they navigate the pressures of their profession, the cost of ambition, and the tragic consequences of their mistakes. Unlike other movies of the time, Men in White refused to offer reassuring answers or neat solutions. The film's willingness to tackle real-life issues, such as medical mistakes, hospital politics, and the fragility of life, set off alarm bells among censors and critics. Editorials warned that Men in White might shake the public's faith in medicine, and parent groups accused it of fostering distrust in vital institutions. The emotional intensity of the film, combined with its controversial themes, made it an immediate target for bans and heavy editing. For years, Men in White was shown only in heavily censored versions, with many prints disappearing entirely. The uncut film was shelved for decades, its reputation growing among those who had heard of its legendary frankness and emotional impact. Today, Men in White is recognized as a groundbreaking drama that dared to look at the costs of human error. But for a long time, it was a film too disturbing for American audiences, and too real for the censors to allow. Nightworld, 1932. Nightworld is a film that lives up to its title. Set in a city nightclub, the movie follows a diverse cast of characters as their paths intersect over a single night filled with danger, heartbreak, and hope. Unlike other films of the time, Nightworld stripped away glamour and showed the gritty reality of city life after dark. Audiences were unsettled by the film's honest portrayal of loneliness, addiction, and desperation. Critics accused Nightworld of glorifying vice and portraying the city as a place of endless misery. Civic leaders and religious groups quickly mobilized to have the film banned, and in many cities, screenings were halted after just a few days. With box office returns plummeting, the studio shelved Nightworld, and it disappeared from view for decades. Only rare prints survived, treasured by collectors who recognized the film's unique power and emotional depth. When Nightworld was finally re-released years later, critics hailed it as a lost gem, a film that showed the reality of urban life without compromise. Its initial disappearance speaks to the power of movies to disturb and the willingness of censors to bury what they cannot control. 13 Women, 1932. 13 Women was billed as a suspense thriller, but what audiences got was a film so unsettling it was quietly withdrawn from circulation. The story follows a group of former schoolmates who become the targets of a mysterious figure intent on orchestrating their downfall. The film's relentless pacing and psychological intensity set it apart from other movies of the era. What made 13 Women especially disturbing was its willingness to explore the destructive power of prejudice, manipulation, and revenge. The film's villain, played by Myrna Loy, is driven by a thirst for retribution, and her actions have consequences that ripple through every character's life. Critics worried that the movie invited audiences to sympathize with darkness, and parent groups called for its removal from theaters. After a short run marked by public outcry, the studio shelved 13 Women, and it languished in obscurity for years. Only a few prints survived, passing into the hands of collectors and historians who championed its daring approach and psychological depth. In recent years, 13 Women has been recognized as a pioneering thriller, but in its own time, it was a film too disturbing to be shown and too provocative to be forgotten. The Mask of Fu Manchu, 1932. The Mask of Fu Manchu was one of MGM's most lavish productions, starring Boris Karloff as the notorious villain Dr. Fu Manchu. The film is a whirlwind of danger, exotic adventure, and grandiose spectacle. But beneath the action and excitement lay themes that deeply disturbed audiences and critics alike. The film's portrayal of villainy and chaos was so intense that censors and community leaders warned it might incite fear and misunderstanding. The story's unrelenting tension and the eerie performance by Karloff left viewers unnerved, and the film's daring depiction of power and fanaticism struck a nerve in an already anxious America. In response to public protests and concerns about the film's tone, MGM pulled The Mask of Fu Manchu from circulation in many regions. For years, the film was difficult to find, with only rare screenings in select cities. Over time, The Mask of Fu Manchu has been reevaluated as a classic adventure and a case study in how a movie's willingness to disturb can also be its greatest asset. But in the early 1930s, it was simply too much for the mainstream, relegated to the shelves for decades. Convention City, 1933. Convention City became legendary for all the wrong reasons. This raucous comedy about a wild business convention pushed boundaries with its irreverence, chaos, and relentless send-ups of corporate life. The film pulled no punches in showing how quickly respectability could dissolve into bedlam when business leaders left home for a few days. Audiences were taken aback by the movie's fast pace, sharp wit, and willingness to lampoon authority figures. Critics accused Convention City of corrupting the spirit of American business and encouraging a disregard for tradition. Religious and civic organizations called for bans, and the studio, facing mounting pressure, withdrew the film from theaters and destroyed many prints. For decades, Convention City was the stuff of legend, an infamous lost film that became a symbol of pre-code Hollywood's daring. Only a handful of stills and reviews survive, and the movie's absence has only increased its mystique. Convention City stands as a final reminder that in the pre-code era, Hollywood sometimes went too far for its own good. The legacy of these shelved films is not just their disappearance, but the debates they started, and the power of movies to shock, challenge, and ultimately outlast even the most determined efforts to suppress them. These 13 pre-code films vanished from screens not because they failed, but because they succeeded at unsettling, provoking, and challenging every notion of what cinema could be. Their disappearance is a testament to the power of storytelling and the fears of a society desperate to keep certain truths locked away. Which lost classic would you dare to watch? Tell us in the comments below. If you love stories from Hollywood's hidden vaults, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. The real history of film is always stranger than fiction.